Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Felix here with your word on the street, and we're continuing our study in the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, specifically through the final wrath of God upon man, and that's known as the bowl judgments. The judgments are coming to earth with like a mega size of torment that is beyond man's comprehension. Scripture refers to this time as the Great Tribulation. And if you recall from previous teachings, there are three judgments in the last days of human history known as the seven seal judgment that takes place before the Great Tribulation, which is a time referred to by Jesus as the beginning of woes. And then we get into the seven trumpet judgments during the time of the Great Tribulation. And finally, we are about to cover the last moments of human history known as the bowl judgments that will take place at the end of that Great Tribulation time. And there is a huge difference between the bowl judgments and the previous two set of judgments, and that is that the bowl judgments will be a total destruction of ungodliness and evil of this world. So let's open up our Bibles to Revelation chapter 16, verses 1 and 2, in a teaching entitled, The First Bowl Judgment, Loathsome Sores. And here John writes in verse 1, he says, "And then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the seven angels to go and pour out the bowls of the wrath of God on the earth." And then he finishes up in verse 2 and he says, "So the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image." And so it begins with a great loud voice coming from the temple of heaven. And that is the voice of God giving the orders. It is his wrath and his command that bring to an end of all of the ungodliness and the evil on the earth. And we have to always remember that God is just and righteous, okay? And because of those attributes of God, we know that he will right all the wrongs that have ever occurred. And then in verse 2, we read about the first bowl judgment as it's poured out upon the earth. And what is the judgment? So John tells us here is that it's a foul and loathsome sore. Loathsome meaning to cause to be disgusting, revolting, repulsive, okay? And in other words, they're foul and disgusting sores that are going to be poured out on man. And as the bowl is poured out onto the world, people will be afflicted with these sores, and they're going to be open and foul and disgusting and painful. And the people that will be in agony and tortured as their bodies are covered with these sores, and they get no rest day or night. And these sores will be incurable, and there will be no remedy for the relief of that. John tells us a specific detail about who will be affected by the bowl judgment. And he writes in part, he says, "A foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image." So those are two descriptions of who's going to get that. So this is a clear reference that the judgment is going to be poured out only upon the Antichrist and his followers, upon those who receive that mark, known as 666, and those who worship him in his government, his false government of Babylon. Okay? And it's interesting that these sores are much like a similar plague of boils that came upon the Egyptians in Exodus chapter 9, verse 8 to 11. The only difference here is that man will be unable to find protection from this plague. Revelation chapter 16, verses 1 and 2, the first bowl judgment, loathsome sores, and that's your word on the street.